Oh, let's do it, man. Let's dive in. Are we good? We're live?
Not yet. People are it's connecting right now. So we'll give it another, and then we'll give it like 10 seconds. So it's connecting. I haven't done it in a while. I hope people still join because it's
No,
been
we're
so.
good.
It's been like 3 weeks. I'm gonna get back to every week. All right, we got some people joining. We got 10 people. That's all we need.
We
That's
got 24, 25 on my end over here.
okay. It's moving up. It's clicking up. We're gonna give it another few seconds,
There
and
we
we'll
go.
start our conversation. It's good to have you on, my friend.
Always
And
good to be.
and also, I mean, it's relevant. You're seeing firsthand what political violence looks like when what Trump after what Trump said yesterday. So, all right, let's give another 30 seconds. Everybody, come on in, join the room. It's fun in here.
We're about to
It's gonna be a
crack
lot of.
100, so that's great.
I promise people it's gonna be fun. All right, let's see another jump of people, and then all right, here we go. Let's let the cars go by outside. And welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show and Substack Live. I'm very excited to have back on my friend Qasim Rashid, a human rights attorney, has his own Substack which you must subscribe to. Let's address this with Qasim Rashid, a tireless activist for human rights. Qasim, thank you so much for being on, my friend. Great to see you as always.
Always good to be here with you, man. How are you? How are you managing in these times? I stopped asking how are you doing. I started asking how are you managing in these times.
I compartmentalize my life in a granular detail so things don't blend into each other because then everything's a mess all the time. Because so usually go like, well, I'm fine, like the world's a mess. But so let's talk about obviously the horrific news from yesterday of the shooting of Charlie Kirk and the concerns about future political violence and what we might see. But just what's your reaction? What do you want to share about what we saw, which was such a jarring video? It was one of the most horrific things I've seen in terms of something live and watching the footage a few minutes later.
Yeah, it felt surreal. I think the first time I saw it, I thought there's got to be some AI. I mean, your mind tries to rationalize when you see something horrible like that happen. I wrote a piece on my Substack yesterday about empathy. That two things can be true. I can, oppose everything that he stood for, reject the hatred and bigotry and vitriol that he spewed, and still recognize that he's a human being,
Right.
and we have to have empathy for our fellow human beings. And that, to me, isn't weakness. It's what keeps us human. It's actually strength. It's not acceptance of his views or his positions by any stretch of the imagination. It's a recognition that the sustainable way forward is empathy. Hannah Arendt is reported to have said that the loss of empathy is the first sign that a society is about to fall into barbarism. And so,
Mhm.
there's a lot of commentary to be made. I wrote about the fact that this is a guy who said guns save lives, and he justified children being killed by saying that a few deaths are worth it to maintain the Second Amendment. So there's all the reasons, and then as Muslims we know how much he demonized Muslims, and
Yep.
even Zoran Mamdani tried to tie him to 9/11. He was 9 years old when 9/11 happened, and just all sorts of atrocious things. And I think my point is, if we are going to be serious about bringing down the political temperature, then dunking on an assassination is not the way to do it. And you won't hear that from me. For me, the conversation needs to be, how do we meaningfully address this so it doesn't happen again? I don't want people getting assassinated, whether it's at a university or at a park or at a church or at a school or a synagogue. I don't want people to have to worry about going to a football game and wondering if someone's going to sneak in a gun. I mean, these are horrible things to think about. And so for me, this goes back to the conversation that yes, thoughts and prayers are important. I'm a person of faith, I pray, and action is important. How do we take meaningful action to ensure that these kinds of school shootings don't happen? Because then I'll close with this point, that while Charlie Kirk suffered gun violence and died by gun violence in Utah, there was another school shooting at Evergreen High School in Colorado, where three
Yep.
more children, four including the shooter, were injured in another school shooting. We've had more than 300 mass shootings this year. So that's where my answer is: how do we have empathy and then transform that into meaningful action so this stops happening?
Yeah, and I liked what you said at the beginning, and I talked about it on my radio show last night. Let's be honest about everything here. There's a
Yeah.
visceral reaction to who Charlie Kirk is, and then there's an intellectual reaction to the idea we cannot have a
Yeah.
society where it's acceptable to kill people because you disagree with them. And I went through what Charlie Kirk said about blacks and Muslims and the gay community and on and on. And I went through it and I said, this is despicable and vile, but it still does not merit a death sentence.
Yeah.
Because if that's fine, then people on the right can go kill Rachel Maddow, you, me, Joy Reid, any of our friends out there because they don't like our views. We can't allow this. And I'm not being holier than thou. I'm saying that's not our society. Just devolves into barbarism if you do that. And look, I'm from Jersey. Like I hated this guy. I think he was awful. I didn't talk about him much. I didn't view him. He wasn't in my galaxy of people I would cover much on my show, to be honest. You know, he was making his living as a grifter in his own way. But when you really looked at his bigotry and violence, he made the lives of people really difficult. And for example, for the Muslim community that both Qasim and I are involved, he wanted to exterminate us from public view. Like his goal was, say, he said it was suicide to allow Muslims to be involved in politics in America. He literally called it suicide.
Yeah.
And that we want to destroy civilization. Those are words intended to incite hate and even violence against us. But I didn't see any violence that actually happened from it. But you know, he's a bigot. He didn't deserve to die for his bigotry, though. That's the difference. We counter him with our language, our words, our empathy, our compassion, our knowledge, not with our bullets. And
That's well
that's a
said.
divide that we have to have in this country. I so beg people. I understand the anger. I mean, you probably saw Kessim online. There are a lot of people saying a lot of things, and I got that visceral reaction. I understand. They despise him, and he made their life difficult. But for his words, it's too. We will lose everything. This nation will just
No, I
fall
agree.
into a decentralized nation where just violence is acceptable every day.
Well,
Can't do it.
my point is, if you really want to hit him on actions, he supported overthrowing the 2020 election. There's plenty of evidence he was involved there. I mean, talk about that aspect of it. And on the words, and I spoke about this yesterday as well, and even yesterday, and even now, I'm getting plenty of hate from his followers and supporters who believed his disinformation on Islam and Muslims and are sending me messages that, get your Sharia law out of this country. We're not going to let you take over. We're not going to let you invade. I mean, just nonsensical stuff that you can tie directly back to him. And you know what? It's a free country. You have free speech. You can do that. This is where I think we need to continue to build our advocacy. And I truly believe that our compassionate model is far more effective. We just need to do a better job of that. And, again, just doubling down, empathy for his wife, for his children, and recognition that we can't perpetuate the kind of divisive rhetoric that unfortunately he was a big part of because it doesn't solve anything.
And I'm watching corporate media sanitize him. That's not right either. His legacy, he wasn't bad. He was not ashamed of his
Yeah.
what we call bigotry. He called it truth and knowledge, right? So they should not sanitize it in any way. And like the idea that he was just a right wing activist or a conservative activist. No, he trafficked in white supremacy, a lot of anti-blackness, anti-transgender stuff off the charts, and they should print that. They're not being disrespectful. That's who he is. He wasn't hiding it. He was literally talking about it when he was killed. And I'm
Right.
not being like mean or anything about it. I'm being honest. This is his legacy. Is what he wants it to be. Those words, print them. You're not being disrespectful. That's who the guy was. If some on the right are going to love what he said. Others are going to be like, "Wow, that I didn't know anything about him. He sounds despicable." He was to us, but on the right, he's beloved, and that's the world we live in. What a
Yeah.
divide in our country. It's
Yeah.
not even like things that should be completely unacceptable as hate. We have another side to it in America now that's the currency on the right, and that's our fight going forward.
Well, I think that point you make is extraordinarily important, Dean, because if you are a newspaper editor, if you are a columnist, an opinion writer, if you're anyone with a public platform, and you're hesitating publishing something that he was proud of because it's disrespectful, you should ask yourself, why am I hesitating? Right? This is not like I discovered that he got caught in a DUI when he was 19 and he's embarrassed about that and he's done
Right.
better. Right? Where nobody was hurt, nobody was injured. This is not like he got caught shoplifting when he was 7 years old and you're trying to do a character assassination, or like they did with Trayvon Martin, that oh my God, he had marijuana in his system at some point. This is not like a character assassination. I mean, he flat out said that black women were inferior, and he wouldn't want to fly in a plane where a black woman was a pilot. He flat out said that black people were better in 1940 under Jim Crow. They were better off than they are right now. I mean, these are things he believed. And my only point to folks is that if you have a visceral reaction that, wow, that's a pretty terrible thing, I shouldn't publish it, well, just remember, this is what he believed. This is what he stood for. And it's okay to say that both I condemn violence against him and don't tolerate that in the least bit, and this kind of rhetoric is unhinged and indefensible.
I agree. I mean, the comments that we were just talking about with Cass and I about about Islam aren't from like 10 years ago. They're from July.
Yeah, I
They're
know.
from a month ago
Yeah.
when Zoran Mandami won the Democratic nomination for mayor.
Yeah.
And he was saying it's not Islamophobic to say they want to destroy society, and that he used the term it's suicide for our civilization
Yeah.
to allow these Muslims. And he would do the thing. I'm sure there are a few good Muslims individually, but as a faith, it's incompatible. And then he would say the reasons why. And he said because they want to make their religion the law of the land. I'm like, you can say that with a straight face? You literally have said you're against the wall between church and state. I mean, it's laughable. But
Yeah.
again, this is not character assassination. This is who he is, and this is the way he wants to be remembered. And I
Yeah.
think that's the problem. You've got media now going, "Oh, it seems wrong. It's always been wrong." But
Yeah.
that's who he is. So
Yeah.
write about it, add it, and let people make the decisions about who this guy is. You know, there was a famous line from Julius Caesar that I quoted on my show last night from Shakespeare's play about Mark Antony giving the eulogy for Julius Caesar. Said, "I didn't come here to praise Caesar; I came to bury him." And said, "You know, the evil men does lives after them," and that's the reality. Whatever we say today lives after us because of Google and the internet, and it's there for everyone to see. So don't sanitize him. Tell people who he was. He was proud of who he is, and it's kind of remarkable. So now I want to shift gears, though. It's all related. So Donald Trump last night gives this talk to the video, and one part of it sounds out like good, like we can't have this kind of violence, and then he says Charlie Kirk, what happened to him directly, he said directly tied to the language of the left. We don't even know who the shooter is. We have no idea what the motivation is. We could speculate all day. It could have been just a disgruntled young guy. It could have been someone with a political agenda. We don't know. But there is Trump ginning up hate and then listing acts of violence in recent years, but only from the left, literally ignoring January 6th, the terrorist attack by a MAGA supporter in June in Minnesota, the Paul Pelosi attack, ignoring all of that. What do you make of that, my friend?
I mean, Donald Trump might as well be a drive-in movie theater because the projection is off the charts. And the reality is, there's a study done by ABC News in 2020 that looked at the acts of political violence inspired by the last 4 or 5 presidents, and they counted 54 over the last like 20 years, and all 54 were tied directly to Donald Trump. 0 were tied to Clinton or to Obama or to Bush. All 54 were tied to Donald Trump. And the evidence is undeniable. These are people who physically attacked others, innocent victims, citing Donald Trump. People who, in their defense brief, said, well, Donald Trump said it was okay. People who praised Donald Trump in their court hearings said, well, he's a president and he said, I'll pay for our legal fees, and that's why I committed this act of violence. 54. And so my thing is, you know, and you're the same. We're plenty critical of Democrats. We don't give them a single step or leniency when we think they mess up. But if you're going to tell me that there's a both sides on this, then I'm sorry, you're just living in an alternate reality. Corporate media needs to ask Donald Trump to answer for all 54 of those. And then once he's done that, then come talk to Democrats and say, why did you call him a fascist? Well, he's doing fascistic things like militarizing cities and sending ICE fascists after children in school and undercover masked agents and deporting citizens without due process of law. Fascists do these kinds of things, and we need to call it out for what it is. But don't even get me started on bringing down the political rhetoric. There's one side who is extraordinarily active, and the documented data backs it up. What's that old right-wing saying? Facts don't care about your feelings. The facts don't care about your feelings in this one. The facts are clear that 99%, and by the way, the DHS, the FBI, hundreds of police departments surveyed, all report unanimously the single greatest terror threat to the United States is white supremacy, right-wing, Christian nationalist terrorism. This is a unanimous approach. This is not me, Qasim, the Muslim talking. This is FBI, DHS, and hundreds of police departments. And then you compound that with Trump and 54 cases of actual political violence that he's inspired, 0 by Democratic presidents, hell, 0 by George Bush. That's the source of this violence. That's where the accountability needs to be, and that's where the focus has to remain until there is meaningful accountability there.
And let's be really blunt. If people are saying, I haven't heard about all those instances of violence by Trump in the last 24 hours in this coverage, that's the failing of corporate media.
Yeah.
That's why we need independent media more than ever, because they are too beholden to corporate interests, and some of them truly fear Trump, that he's going to open up another DOJ investigation to them. And some are executives who are on board with Trump. Doesn't matter. The end result is the same, not getting full coverage. You know, I wrote an article for Substack today where the headline was a simplistic thing, but it was to begin the whole discussion. And that is Donald Trump praises Charlie Kirk, flags are at half mast. But when in Minnesota, when a Trump supporter killed Democrats, Donald Trump refused to even call the governor. And
Not,
to
yeah,
me, that summed up, and that was the beginning of a longer conversation in the article about the same things you were just talking about. That honestly, to Donald Trump, I've never had a president make it more clear that our lives, those who don't agree with him, they literally don't matter to this guy. I have never,
yeah,
ever seen a president be that disdainful. He literally said in July, I hate Democrats.
yeah.
We never heard a president say they hate the other party like that. And our lives really don't matter to this man. We are disposable human beings. We're not even human beings. We're disposable to him. And that's part of the struggle. And when you look at it, the lack of humanity is why he can say what he does and literally just lie. There's also dementia and lack of humanity. You combine that, you got Donald Trump. And
Well,
that's the reality of what we're dealing with here, my friend.
well said. And in addition to your point about not calling Speaker of the Minnesota House, Melissa Hortman's family, not calling Governor Tim Walz, mocking them as unhinged, he ignored yesterday the fact that there was another school shooting. There's no memory for them, no honor for them. And yeah, I thought about this. I was talking to a friend about this earlier about, if we had the flags at half staff every time there was a school shooting, they would perpetually be at half staff. And that should be an outrage to everyone, whether you're a parent or not. If you simply care about the next generation, that should be an outrage. But for some reason, the conversation still isn't there. And I don't understand. There was a point in time where I thought that, God forbid, people on the right start suffering gun violence, prominent people on the right start suffering gun violence. God forbid that's what it'll take for them to understand that gun violence is indiscriminate. Doesn't care if you're a Republican or Democrat, doesn't care if you're black, white, brown, doesn't matter if you're old or young. Gun violence impacts us all. But now we're seeing members of Congress have been shot. We're seeing people like Charlie Kirk get shot. We're seeing example after example. I mean, red states have a 40% higher murder rate than do blue states because of the lack of meaningful gun safety legislation. And still, they don't care. I don't understand what needs to happen for the folks on the right to understand that we're not here to neuter you and to take away all your guns and end guns, period. We're here to simply say, let's have common sense legislation so that people who are responsible can still get access to firearms, and people who are not responsible have a much more difficult time. Like, I don't understand why that's such a controversial statement to make for these folks.
It shouldn't be. But the clip of Charlie Kirk that I played and others have played, he said part of the bargain in America have a Second Amendment is you must accept gun deaths. And I don't. And you know what? If our philosophy was implemented, maybe Charlie Kirk's alive today. And that's the reality. I'm not positive, but perhaps so the person who got the gun, we don't know yet. I mean, before this is over, he might be arrested. I just don't know who the person is. But perhaps. But I wanted to touch on the political violence that you suffered recently, the attacks that you got that were violent, and touch on for a quick thing for me, like in 2017, that long ago, I was writing for the Daily Beast and I wrote an article about Donald Trump's refusal to denounce white supremacist violence. This is before Charlottesville. And people at the Der Stürmer, which is a neo-Nazi publication, they fabricated tweets in my name
Yeah.
that they posted on their page saying I'm involved in terrorism and go confront Dean, and I got death threats, and I sued them because that's what we do in America. I'm a lawyer
Yeah.
too, but I had lawyers do it, and got a judgment against the Nazis for $4 million. So yes, I'm rich with Nazi money. No, there was no collection of the judgment, but it was about standing up to the Nazis. But the point was, it was becoming mainstream and normalized years ago. And I know you've been through it many times, but recently you wrote an article for Substack. It was very moving about what you were subjected to. Could you share a little bit about it, Cassie?
Yeah, Dean. And I mean, look, I hope you collect that Nazi money, because at the end of the day, there's no better way to defund fascists than to practically defund fascists. And this is how the KKK, by the way, lost much of their influence when they got sued and defunded. So hoping you can collect that money and put it to a good cause. For me, this is where I'm grateful, Dean, that you and I have these platforms, because now we can talk about these things publicly without being at the mercy of corporate media who simply doesn't care. I reflected how after 9/11, I didn't have a platform, you didn't have a platform, and a lot of the work you're doing now is inspired by the fact that you're like, hey, this is a bunch of crap. I need to build a platform, and you built your own amazing platform, and that's what I'm trying to do as well. I got random threats last Sunday on my phone. The person clearly knew who I was, clearly had done their research on me because they sent me a home address, which I fortunately no longer live at. But the fact that they were able to find a past home address and talk about wiping me off the streets, it's a jarring thing. It's a very real thing. And when I ask folks for support, this is what I mean, that we need to create the conversation to elevate the reality of what's happening. When I ask folks to subscribe, it's so that we can continue to build our platforms. And I'll tell you, Dean, one of the most rewarding kinds of notes that I get from folks is someone who says, I read you not because I agreed with you, but because a friend shared that you're worth reading, and you changed my mind on this really important issue, whether it's
Wow.
Palestine, whether it's reproductive justice, whether it's gun safety. I'm like, that's what I'm talking about. I'm doing so by sticking to the facts, leading with compassion and empathy, and certainly admitting when I'm wrong, because the beauty of citing facts is when you get new evidence, you can say, hey, I've got better evidence now. I'm going to change my mind, because that's what thoughtful, intelligent people do. But I will say, Dean, that this is the reality of the world that we're in right now. This is the reality that we have to face, knowing that when we make these public comments, when we talk about the need for justice, when we talk about the need for fair and compassionate immigration policy, when we talk about reparations or women's reproductive health, or holding accountable those who committed the January 6th insurrection, it upsets people because that permission has been given to them by the likes of Donald Trump. And we have two options. We can either tone it down and say, you know what, maybe I don't need to be so outspoken, or we can recognize that toning it down and being in our little comfort zones is actually not safety. It's just perpetuating and empowering those who wish to do harm. So for me, it's about doubling down. How do we double down on our advocacy? That's why I love these conversations. How do we double down on the synergy of working together? And how do we encourage folks to support our content, to like and subscribe and share? Small things, but done in mass, can make a major movement. That's what we're trying to build here.
And that's an excellent point. And the idea of me like stepping back doesn't make sense. I'm from Jersey. I'm also half Sicilian. I'm half Palestinian, but I'm half Sicilian. And instantly, like, let's go get a baseball bat and talk to these people. It's the Palestinian side that tempers it. And you talk
Sure.
about the narrative and the idea of some trying to squelch it. I talked to you about it, and I won't go into it now because we're going to wrap up. But you were nice enough to say to have my fiance on the show, who's doing a one-person show, and it opens tomorrow in New York and runs to October 11th. But the point of it, it's about being Palestinian born in Israel. It's her story. It's a human story. It's not a political story, but because it's about Palestine, it's viewed politically. It's personal. And the hate that she got on Facebook, not about the show, no one's seen it here in New York. That how dare you, and the idea of a lot of like very anti-Palestinian stuff. The narrative, just the narrative scares certain people about any minority group. If people have an agenda to define you a certain way because it's consistent with their own political aspirations, we upset that narrative. And the result now is to go to violence and vile comments that years ago may have been a discussion or they would ignore you. It's different. So before we wrap up, because I have to let you go, it's always great chatting with you. How can people sign up for your Substack?
My website is just, I'm going to put it in the chat for those who want to subscribe. It's just qasimrashid.com/subscribe. I will say I have no paywall ever on any of my content. And I do that on purpose because my focus is human rights and I want to make that accessible. Someone said really beautifully that one reason we lost the 2024 election is because all the intellectual stuff is behind a paywall and all the dumb stuff is free. And I'm trying to provide intellectual stuff for free. And so those who have the capacity to join as a paid subscriber, I love you, I welcome you. And those who are simply able to subscribe and share the content, I love you and welcome you all the same. And for those of you who are my followers who are over here from my Substack, if you haven't already subscribed to Dean, this is a man who has been leading from the front unapologetically for decades, not years, decades. He's that old. So make sure you subscribe to him and support his work as well.
I have my setting set on the camera for 1999, so I don't age. But I am really ancient. Qasim, thank you, brother. Thanks so much for being on. I really appreciate. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. It's great to see all the comments. I wish I had time to respond. But I will online if you want to email me, dean@deanofradio.com. And if you're in New York, I will send you a discount code for my fiance's show, dean@deanofradio.com. I sincerely will send it to you. You'll love the show. Thanks, brother. Have a great day.
Peace out, brother.
Take care.